Day 506 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Jelzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll head over across to the stats, the legacy form of the stats today, and currently Russia is sitting on more than 236,000 military personnel losses, which represents an additional 550 losses in the past 24 hours alone. Then as for hardware losses, 5 tanks, 9 armoured combat vehicles, and a whopping 24 artillery. Then we'll head across to the Ukrainian map into the Donbas, where we'll start today, as the surrounding regions of the Donbas continue to show updates, this time in the form of the Russian invaders being captured near Bakhmut today. But also nearby to Soledar, the AFU continues to make moves up in the north as they clearly continue to take advantage of weakly defended positions of the Russian army. As right below Rozdolivka, Ukraine has made some additional expanded gains or engagements, not yet shown on this map, but they continue to take advantage of those opportunities afforded to them in the north of the region there. And it's said to be a tricky state of affairs for the Russian units staged in this larger region, as we do get insights straight from the Russian side, usually via Telegram channels, to suggest that their frontline defenses are in a critical condition, which is pretty obvious enough to see given the way of how the map looks right now. But the issues that the Russian army are continuing to face here includes commanders being replaced, officers refusing direct orders, and limited or no reserves. Of course, Kadyrov and his TikTok Chechen army crew are expected to come back here, if not already, on some level. However, that group of misfits are likely to be 2 lines back in the defensive rear, with most of them instead pointing a gun at the first line of defense, telling them to stay in position or get shot by their own if they attempt to flee backwards, which has been pretty much Russia's overall state of play in this war at the moment, particularly in this sector, as they continue to fill the gaps with untrained frontliners, as the command orders the gap fillers to not take one step back, soldier. Then I'll quickly move to a little bit further north, as the Russian army attempted new assaults as they were trying to advance south of Dobrova, but their attempts were once again thwarted. Not a lot of changes on the front line here over the past few weeks or even months. And meanwhile, just next door, the AFU brought reserves to Zarichne to likely contain any further advancements by the enemy, then subsequently squash this long-standing Russian bulge or protrusion, as you can see here. So certainly watch this space. Then somewhere in the east, a Russian Gyatsin S 152mm self-propelled gun was destroyed by a Ukrainian precision artillery strike in the Donetsk Oblast somewhere. Then we'll head across to the larger southern axis at the moment, so the Orikhiv axis. So here we go. So in the direction of Novopokrovka, the Ukrainian forces are currently reporting some very recent successes and are now gaining ground in this area, as they were able to break through to into the Russian positions there. So expect an update on this one, at least as per this map shortly there anyway. Then right next door in the Hulapole region, so move across there, Russian troops on the Red Line carried out attacks on Ukrainian positions, although given the freshness of this information, it's not at all clear whether this has to do with defensive actions against advancing Ukrainians forces or actual offensive actions to turn the tide in this sector in Russia's favor. But given that in the last few weeks we've seen Russia send in reserve reinforcements to the to areas that Ukraine is actively performing assault operations on, it's likely a move by the Russian units to keep what land they currently have right there in the now instead. But the big news over the past few days in this region has been how Russian Lieutenant General Surkov was liquidated by a storm shadow strike in Berdyansk. I'll zoom in a little bit better for that one, which is where he and multiple other high-ranking officers were liquidated after having set up their HQ at a place called Dune Hotel, which they forcibly overtook and turned into their own military installation. But a lieutenant general should have the awareness that setting up his headquarters in Berdyansk is not a good idea, as the AFU has struck Berdyansk military installations for what feels like countless times now, just this year. So this guy should have been on the constant move, if he is to be stationed anywhere in the Zaporizhia Oblast. It's just pretty much all within range of anything that Ukraine has to offer now, obviously the Storm Shadows. And so if the AFU doesn't take out long-standing and experienced Russian military leaders, well, then Russia seems to do it instead via political means, as the latest victim there was Major General Ivan Popov, for instance, who, after having won too many quarrels with the Russian MOD, he was dismissed from duty. Then, very shortly after, he started to speak out about how Russian logistics centers are getting destroyed, Russian counter batteries are not performing well or really at all. Also, how the ineffective strategies of the Russian army are causing massive amounts of Russian casualties, which are far exceeding, as he said, what was expected in this war. So it's all very telling stuff from essentially a disgruntled employee of the state, as he sheds further light on the systemic issues that plague the Russian military. And he even went so far as to call the Russian MOD leadership, quote, treacherous and vile. So he's clearly fed up with it all. I don't know how long he'd survive at this point. Then moving on, so Russian losses of note for this region in the past day include 2 unguided multiple launch rocket systems, a BM-21 and a BM-27, which I'm always quite fond of reporting on, given the artillery barrage of shelling destruction that these systems indiscriminately blanket an area with. Then we'll momentarily head across to the Black Sea once more. Snake Island, as you might remember, right there. Zelensky's visit here, 4 or 5 days ago, in fact, had Russian forces since deciding to drop some munitions on this rock in the sea over the past 2 days. I mean, they do know there's no civilians or Zelensky here anymore, right? And the whole thing just seems quite amateur in the way that Russia appears to be working in a delayed information space, causing them to make these types of low-yield delayed decisions. Or no yield, actually. Then moving across to some news for today, as it's a bit of a shorter video, a little bit less in-depth, unfortunately, but here we go. So starting off with some hardware updates, as it's all coming in droves over the last day or two. So I'll list out some of the main ones for now, including Ukraine to receive 2 more Patriot air defense batteries, which is fantastic to hear. Then, this news is from yesterday, but Ukraine will receive 1,000 Black Hornet drones from Norway, which are equipped with a camera and are great for acute reconnaissance missions under close quarters urban warfare combat conditions. Then Germany is sending 6 new Gepard air defense systems, which are great for taking out Russian drones. Just as a note, Ukraine has already received 30 of these Gepards from Germany, so this accounts for an additional 20% on top, which is always fantastic to hear. Keep bringing in the air defense systems to Ukraine. But also, Ukraine will also receive from Germany more bridge layers, 40 Marder IFVs, 25 Leopard 1s, and a whole bunch of ammunition resupply. Then also, France is to send 50 Scalp missiles, which is basically Storm Shadow missiles, which have been an indispensable platform for Ukraine in this war now. Then even Bulgaria is getting in on the mix, sending more than 100 of its BTR-60 APCs. They are older, but they're likely to be used for personnel carrying across and movements around the battle space. So as you can see, the political will from last year to supply Ukraine with defensive and offensive capabilities has really turned into a steady build-up of action over this year. And it's only expected to get better and increase as the year continues, and obviously 2024, if we're actually still dealing with this war. And I say that because the most unexpected of things can happen so quickly when you're asleep. You don't even know it's happening. For instance, the mutiny from a few weeks back that could have gone really south for Russia. Then I'll do a few quick rapid fire funnies to round it all off for today, guys. So in the first funny, this Mad Max style Russian T-80 was spotted with armor plates made of empty 115mm shells, which is actually pretty useless against weapons like the NLAW and the Javelin ATGMs, which Ukraine has plenty of. In fact, they've had them since the war began. Now, necessity is often the mother of all invention, but in this case, highly doubtful. Then in another funny, which I just love, so someone posted online this amazing turret tossing Russian tank model online, which if you look closely, you'll see the fiery component turret explosion component of it is actually made of from one of those Himalayan salt rock lamps, pink Himalayan salt rock lamps, I believe. I think I'm inspired to pull out my old salt lamp present I received from about 3 years ago out of storage and create this truly amazing model of reality. Then a final funny to round it all off with. So here we have an image of a Russian truck exploded. But if you look closely, interestingly, some of the most intact pieces on the truck bed, are 2 washing machines. And both appear to be the front loader variant, which although they do require a typically longer wash cycle, and you need to bend your back over to add and remove clothing, they do perform a much higher quality wash, safer on your garments, and a more thorough clean. And seemingly built of better material than anything Russia has. So that has to be it for today, guys. A little bit shorter. Certainly, like I say, a bit less in depth. I wanted to do more, but I just can't with time restrictions today. But I appreciate your support on all of that. Please send me a like and a comment. I do try to be pretty active in the comment section where I can, if only to give you guys a thumbs up or do a little cheeky comment here and there as well. But I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.